of my favorite things to do. I can remember being in elementary school and reading through the entire Lord of the Rings series in 1 week. And I brought it back, and my teacher who had recommended it said, "Oh, did you finish the first book?" And I said, "No, I actually finished all 3. And he looked at me and he said, "I remember this specifically, you're a freak." I think that is the only time I've ever been called a freak by my teacher, but it's something I'll definitely remember. I loved reading any book I could get my hand on. Comic books, Archie's, Scooby-Doo, The Hunger Games, and 39 Clues, and the Inheritance trilogy. Fictional, non-fictional. I loved the stories that were portrayed in books. But as I grew up, reading started to fade into the background. I had more schoolwork that I had to do. I was now engaged in more extracurricular activities like sports. And I stumbled across the internet. I would watch Netflix or scroll through Facebook. All these things combined, along with, watching 82 games of hockey a year, would take away from the time that I had to read, or at least so I thought. What was once a joy and a passion for mine, really I didn't think about so much anymore. But earlier this year, I was thrown a book by a friend. It was just a random book, something that he had recommended, and I hadn't really read that much in a long time. And so I just picked it up, because he said it was a decent book, and started reading. And all of a sudden, something that I thought I was way too busy for, I finished the book in a week. And I remember at the end of that week handing the book back to him and saying, this book wasn't really all that great. It was okay. But it did show me that I actually have time for reading. And I started just picking up books and started reading them. And it is an amazing thing when you get lost in a book. A book can create so many emotions. It can create heartache or anger or happiness or sadness. And it's incredible that these words on a page by an author who may not even be alive anymore is able to communicate an idea, an emotion, something to you that you would have never been able to have without someone penning their thoughts on that page. After initially rediscovering that joy I once had as a kid, like all things, as you do it longer, kind of the initial excitement wears off, and you have to find a rhythm and find a routine with it. And so that's really where I want to go with the rest of this video, is how do you maintain reading after you've just been thrown a book and you picked it up and maybe you read it and it was a great book, but now you want to read more, but you can't seem to figure out the way to do that. The first thing that I have found that has helped me is obviously to set aside time for reading. Now this may be difficult as we all have busy lives, we all have different things that we are doing. But it doesn't even have to be an hour, it doesn't have to be 2 hours. It can be small segments of time where you find yourself really not doing much. Another great way to do this is through audiobooks.
John Keats, Ode to Psyche.
If you're cooking or something, you can turn on an audiobook, and although that's not physically reading, it still is portraying that same information through listening. Secondly, I would say use your local library if you have one. Buying books can be expensive, like 20 bucks a book. If you bought like 5 books in a month, that's 100 bucks a month. So use the local library, and this is also kind of adds a deadline for you somewhat, You've got to return the book within whenever the specified period of time is. I think usually 3 weeks or something like that. And if you don't finish it, then you might not be able to take it out again for another long time. So it gives you a motivation to sit down and read. So it's kind of a double whammy. On the flip side of that, though, is that you have to understand that reading is not a race. And this is something that I've really kind of struggled with before, because I see on YouTube and all these people are like, I read 100 books a year, or I read a book a week, or I read this many books, and it seems to me that it's all about getting the maximum amount of information, and you're just gobbling and gobbling and gobbling all these different books. But you want to make sure that you don't read a lot, but you read well. And as I say, it's about quality over quantity when it comes to books. Sometimes I find that going through it a lot more slowly, that it can help me actually digest and process what the book is being said, and I'll actually remember it. Another thing that I've found is that sometimes it helps to have multiple books at once. Now, this isn't really something that I would ever think of before either. I like to start one, finish through, move on to the next one, complete it, be done with it before I move on. But having multiple books at once allows me to read different things when I'm in different moods. And so depending on what I'm feeling like, or depending on the time of day, or how much energy I have, having a different book for a different occasion helps me still read without feeling like I always have to be like fully engaged. Another note I will say, and this is something that is probably very obvious, but should be said anyways, is enjoy the book that you are reading. So many times I see people take a book because someone else recommended it and they think they should like it, or they get excited and they take a book that's way just too difficult and they get disappointed or frustrated that they can't keep going, and they just give up, and then they just go back to their old ways and don't want to read anymore. If you find a book that you enjoy, if you find a book that you really actually want to read, you're more likely to stick it through. You're more likely to see it through to the end and to enjoy the process. I think in rediscovering reading, what I have found is that in reading there is a joy. And reading is not a chore. It shouldn't be a chore. It's a joy. And by taking the time to read, you can rediscover what you didn't even know what you were missing. Hey guys, thank you so much for following along, and I really appreciate every one of you. It means a lot that you guys watch my videos and you subscribe. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, or comment or like this video, and check out my other videos. It would mean a lot to me. Tell your friends, tell your family, as I want to grow this channel to be a community of people who are seeking after what is good and embracing the reality before them. Thank you guys. See you next time.